They refused to serve her, thinking she was just an ordinary black woman. No reservation, no VIP card. Nothing about her screamed wealthy. But what they didn't know was that she built the entire hotel they were standing in. And after a single 26-second phone call, upper management came running in panic. The receptionist went pale. The manager begged for forgiveness. And her? She simply smiled and took the key to the finest suite in the building that bears her name. A 46-year-old black CEO walked into her own luxury hotel and was told, "We're full, guests only." She didn't argue. She made one phone call and everything changed. She didn't want anything fancy, no welcome party, no red carpet, just a key, a warm bed, and a night to reset before a board meeting she hadn't even planned on attending in person. But when Simone Harrington stepped through the revolving glass doors of the Harrington Crest in Des Moines, Iowa, nothing went as expected. She walked in with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need attention. Her soft loafers didn't click, her tailored slacks weren't flashy, and her blouse, a dusty blue silk, was clean but plain. A canvas duffel hung off her shoulder. No assistant, no entourage. She looked like any guest, or maybe someone trying to be one. Behind the front desk, a young receptionist was chewing on the end of her pen, her acrylic nails tapping against the keyboard. She glanced up and offered a routine smile, the kind reserved for people you're about to turn away. "Checking in?" Simone smiled, polite as ever. "Yes, under Harrington, Simone." The girl's fingers moved across the keys, then stopped. She blinked, lips tightening. I don't see any reservation under that name." "That's all right," Simone replied calmly. "There's a suite always held open for me." "Ma'am, we're actually at full capacity tonight," the girl said, her tone shifting slightly. "You'd need to have a confirmed booking to stay here, for guests only." Simone's smile didn't drop, but the weight in the room shifted. She looked past the girl to the gold plaque behind her, the Harrington, a Harrington property. Her name wasn't just on a reservation, it was on the building. "I am a guest," she said quietly, "and more than that, I own this hotel." The girl blinked again. For a second she looked stunned, like Simone had just told her she was the Queen of England. Then her lips curled into a skeptical smirk. "You own the Oak Mark?" Simone nodded, calm. The girl leaned toward the desk phone. "I'm going to have to call the manager." "Go ahead." Across the lobby, a couple in golf polos looked over. A man sitting near the fireplace tilted his head. Simone could feel it, that shift, that familiar weight. The look of someone must be lying, and we think we know who it is. Moments later, a thin man with a crooked tie and a clipboard appeared from a side door. His badge read, Assistant Manager Darren Fulton. He took one look at Simone and immediately started speaking with forced cheer. "Good evening. Is there a problem with your reservation?" "She claims to own the hotel," the receptionist said, a little too loudly. Darren hesitated. Simone kept her eyes on him. "I don't claim, I do. My name is Simone Harrington. You'll find it on every quarterly report and every executive board memo. I'm here for one night. You should have a suite held under the owner block." Darren adjusted his glasses. "Right. Just give me one moment, please." He turned toward the back, muttering something into his walkie. Simone stood still. She didn't fidget, didn't raise her voice. But the air was getting thicker. That's when security appeared, not aggressively, not hands-on, but enough to make a point. One stood near the elevators, the other beside the coffee bar just in case. Simone's gaze didn't move. She didn't flinch. But inside she felt it, that quiet fire rising in her chest. Not just because they didn't recognize her, but because they thought she didn't belong. Again. She could have pulled out her ID. She could have shown emails, ownership papers, photos from the ribbon cutting 6 years ago. But instead she stepped back, pulled out her phone, and made one call. That's all she needed. But she knew this wasn't just about a room. It was about something much deeper, and the people around her were about to learn that the hard way. Simone didn't pace. She didn't sigh or look at the time or start recording like some people might have. She just stood in the corner near the marble pillar, phone still in hand, quietly waiting. The call had lasted only 26 seconds. She didn't have to explain much. She didn't even raise her voice, just gave her location, her name, and said, "I've been denied access to my own property. I need this resolved immediately." And then she waited. At the front desk, the receptionist kept typing, as if the screen might somehow change the truth. Darren, the assistant manager, returned with a folder in hand. He looked nervous, but when he saw Simone still standing there calmly, he tried a different tone. "Miss Harrington," he said, emphasizing the last name this time, "I think there's been a mix-up. We just want to verify." Simone cut in gently. "You can verify all you want. I'm not moving." Darren looked past her to the security guard, who didn't budge. The staff was frozen in a quiet standoff, unsure whether to escalate or apologize. Neither option felt safe. She noticed the stairs. 3 women sitting near the window were whispering behind their hands. A young man held his laptop, half open, pretending not to listen. The doorman was no longer greeting anyone, and that's when she saw it. The receptionist checking her phone under the desk, scrolling, searching, probably Googling her name, probably expecting nothing. It would have been funny if it weren't so familiar, 'cause it always played out the same way. People thought they knew what power looked like, what leadership sounded like, what ownership wore. And someone like her, brown skin, textured hair pulled into a neat puff, no designer purse, no loud jewelry, she didn't match the picture, so they questioned it. That's what stung. Not the denial, but the fact that it wasn't even surprising anymore. She remembered another hotel lobby years ago in Milwaukee. She was 28, just made VP, wearing heels that gave her blisters and a suit 2 sizes too big because it was all she could afford. Security had followed her from the moment she walked in. The only thing that saved her was the CFO coming down to greet her in person. She hadn't forgotten that day. And here she was, 20 years later, still proving who she was in a building with her name on the paperwork. She sighed softly, eyes scanning the room. No apology yet. No correction. Just the ticking clock and people trying not to stare too hard. And then the elevator dinged. 2 men stepped out, one in a gray suit with a clipboard, the other in a company fleece. Neither of them looked like hotel staff. They moved with purpose. Simone recognized them immediately. Regional Vice President Marcus Ellington, District Manager Adrian Cole. Now it was their faces that showed a flicker of panic. Marcus approached fast, nodding at Darren without even stopping. "Miss Harrington, we're so sorry, I just got the call." Adrian followed, breathless. "We're taking care of this right now." Darren started to speak, but Marcus cut him off with a look. The receptionist froze in place, eyes wide. She suddenly realized who Simone was. Her face turned pale, and she slowly took a step back. "Suite 1202 has been cleared," Adrian said, checking his tablet. "The driver's being rerouted to take you anywhere you need in the morning. Your usual fruit tray and espresso order will be waiting." Simone gave the smallest smile. "Thank you." But she wasn't done watching. She wanted to see how everyone responded now that they knew who she was, whether their tone would shift, their posture would change. She wanted to witness the way power worked when it finally entered the room. Because it's one thing to be disrespected when people don't know your name, but it's something else entirely when they do and choose to do it anyway. Adrian pulled Darren aside, his voice low but sharp. Marcus was already on the phone, speaking in clipped phrases about HR protocol and service misconduct. The tension that had once been aimed at Simone was now redirecting itself inward, ricocheting through the staff like a pinball of panic. Ziana didn't gloat. She didn't fold her arms or raise her chin in victory. She simply walked back to the front desk, slow, quiet steps, and placed her phone on the counter. "I'll take the 12th floor suite," she said, her voice even. "Same setup. Please send someone up to confirm it's clean." The receptionist opened her mouth but couldn't find the words. Simone didn't wait for her to try. She turned to Marcus. "Have I been checked in?" "Just finished," Marcus replied, flipping his clipboard. "You'll have 2 key cards and an incident report by the time you're in the elevator." "Oh, good. And the rest?" He nodded. "We've issued a site-wide notification. Corporate audit team is on standby. All current staff will be required to go through recertification on guest protocol, and disciplinary actions will begin tonight." Simone glanced over at the receptionist, who was now nervously biting the inside of her cheek. Her acrylic nails tapped against the desk, but the rhythm had changed. No longer careless, now anxious. "You'll speak to her," Simone said plainly. Marcus cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am, privately, with HR present." Adrian looked ready to say more, but Simone raised one hand. "I'll speak to her, too. Not now. After I've rested." She took the key cards, nodded once, and walked toward the elevator. Heads turned. Some guests whispered, others watched in silence, but no one spoke to her directly. The elevator doors opened. As they closed behind her, Simone could still see Darren standing stiff near the front desk, visibly sweating. On the 12th floor, her suite smelled faintly of lemon and eucalyptus. The fruit tray was there, espresso pods neatly stacked beside the machine. A handwritten card with her initials waited on the table, though it had clearly been rushed. She walked through the room slowly, almost like she was inspecting it, not just for cleanliness, but for attitude, for intention, for proof that somewhere, someone still cared about the experience she once built with her bare hands. Because this hotel wasn't just a business, it was her story. She remembered being 33, pitching to a bank in Minnesota that didn't believe she could pull it off. They barely listened, offered brutal loan terms, and practically dared her to succeed. She did. And now, nearly 2 decades later, standing in one of her signature penthouse suites, she was still having to prove it. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. "Everything in motion. Let me know if you want a media statement." Simone paused. She could have made this public, easily. One tweet and it would have gone viral. One interview and the headlines would have written themselves. But she wasn't interested in headlines tonight. This wasn't about rage, it wasn't about revenge, it was about respect, and how it was too often tied to assumptions, not reality. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in silence. Outside, the night was still alive, traffic humming along Grand Avenue, the distant horn of a freight train in the industrial zone. But in the suite, it was still, heavy. Then a knock at the door. "Room service." The young man brought in a fresh espresso, a note of apology from the kitchen manager, and an offer to send a massage therapist on the house. Simone thanked him softly, then closed the door behind him. She sat back down, took a slow sip of the espresso, then looked toward the window at the faint lights flickering across the city. She could feel a shift beginning, not just in this hotel, but in herself. Something was going to change. At exactly 6:30 a.m., Simone Claiborne descended the elevator, this time not as a guest, but as the CEO. Her suit was crisp, deep charcoal with a clean ivory blouse, heels that echoed with every step, and a quiet focus in her eyes that no one dared interrupt. The lobby, just beginning to stir with early checkouts and coffee runs, shifted when she appeared. Staff turned. Conversations paused. Even the barista behind the corner kiosk stopped mid-pour. Marcus and Adrian were already waiting near the fireplace with 3 folders and 2 cups of coffee neither of them had touched. They looked like men who hadn't slept, and probably hadn't. Simone nodded slightly and headed straight for the small executive conference room just past the concierge desk. Marcus followed. Adrian fell and stepped behind. Inside the room, seated stiffly, were the assistant manager Darren, the receptionist, her name tag read Lena Cruz, and a woman from HR who introduced herself only as Evelyn from corporate. Her notepad was already open. Simone didn't sit. She remained standing at the head of the table, arms folded. No one spoke at first. The silence was dense, and Simone asked quietly, "Would someone like to explain what happened last night from your perspective?" Lena looked down immediately. Darren cleared his throat but couldn't find a single word. Simone waited. Finally, Lena mumbled, "I just didn't think she was... I didn't expect... You didn't expect someone like me to own the building," Simone finished for her, calm, controlled. Lena nodded. "Barely. Was I rude to you?" Simone asked. Lena shook her head. "No, ma'am." "Did I raise my voice?" "No." "Did I threaten anyone?" Lena's voice was barely a whisper now. "No." Simone took a slow breath and turned slightly toward Evelyn. "I don't need this to be a firing squad," she said, "but I do need accountability." Evelyn nodded. "Understood." Adrian chimed in. "We're prepared to issue a formal write-up and remove her from front desk rotation until recertification is complete. Darren will be placed on administrative review pending further interviews." Simone nodded once, then finally sat down. She turned toward Lena again. "How long have you worked here?" 4 months. "And in that time, how often have you thought about who built this hotel? Where it came from?" Lena hesitated. I guess I just assumed it was some corporation. A group of investors or something." Simone let the moment hang. "Do you know how many properties I've built across this country?" Lena shook her head. 17. From Baltimore to Phoenix, every one of them designed with intention, luxury made accessible, service made human. I built this brand because I was tired of being treated like a shadow. So tell me why, when I walk into my own lobby, I'm still invisible to the people working under my name." The question wasn't angry, it was tired, honest, heavy. Lena looked like she wanted to melt into her chair. Darren stared straight ahead, face red. Adrian spoke again. "We've already drafted a memo that will go out to every Harrington property today. Mandatory staff-wide inclusivity training, a reset, no exceptions." Simone looked at him. "Make sure it's not just another box to check. I don't want people memorizing scripts. I want them understanding what respect looks like when you think no one's watching." Marcus finally spoke. "We'll make it real." She stood again. The meeting was over. As she walked out of the conference room, the lobby seemed to straighten itself. Staff scrambled, some nodding nervously, but she didn't acknowledge them. Not yet. She wasn't interested in performance. She was looking for change. But before she left the hotel, there was still one more conversation she needed to have, and it had nothing to do with policy. Simone waited until the morning rush had thinned out. She gave it time, not for dramatic effect, but so no one could hide behind distraction. No ringing phones, no fake smiles for guests walking in, just stillness and truth. She spotted Lena Cruz in the staff lounge, behind the coffee bar, seated alone at a narrow table with a half-eaten blueberry muffin in front of her. Her phone was face down. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Neela didn't send someone to call her. She walked in herself. Lena sat up fast, nearly knocking over her drink. "Relax," Simone said, pulling out the chair across from her. "I just want to talk." Lena swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." "Drop the ma'am," Simone replied gently. "This isn't a hearing." Lena nodded, eyes down. They sat for a moment in silence, the hum of the fridge and the low buzz of overhead lights filling the space between them. Then Simone spoke. "Have you ever worked in a place where you felt small?" Lena blinked, looked up. "Yeah, most of the time." "Tell me." Lena hesitated but then shrugged. "I worked at a diner out by I-80 for a year. Wore a paper hat, got yelled at by cooks every shift. Some customers never tipped, some called me kid even though I was 27. I felt invisible most days." Simone leaned back. "So you know what it feels like to be ignored?" Lena nodded. "Yes." "Then help me understand," Simone said, her tone never rising, "how you looked me in the eye last night and decided I didn't belong here." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of guilt, of realization, of something finally settling into place. Lena's voice was rough. I don't know. I didn't mean to. When you walked in, I thought you were maybe lost or waiting on someone else. You didn't look like... She stopped herself. Didn't look like what? Lena shook her head. Like the kind of person who owns hotels. Simone didn't flinch. And what does that kind of person look like? Lena didn't answer. That's the real problem, Simone said. People have a picture in their head. Clean-cut, probably male, probably older, definitely not me. That picture doesn't just live in your head, it affects decisions, it shapes behavior. I'm sorry, Lena said quietly. Really, I know that's not enough, but I am. Simone nodded slowly. It's a start. But I'm not here for an apology. I came here because I wanted you to see me. Not just as your boss. Not as a cautionary tale, as a person. Lena looked confused. I was you once, Simone continued. I started as a receptionist, got mistaken for a janitor more times than I can count, had people call me sweetheart and honey like I wasn't the one keeping the place running. Every time I had to decide whether to fight or let it go. And when I finally got into the boardroom, I told myself I'd build places where people like you could grow. Lena's eyes were wide now. You really started as a receptionist? Simone smiled. In St. Paul. My first boss told me I talked too educated to be on phones and moved me to night audit. That was the beginning. Lena almost laughed. That's unreal. It shouldn't be, Simone said. It should be normal. She stood up. I don't need you to be perfect, but I do need you to be aware. Every guest who walks through that door, old, young, dressed up or not, deserves dignity. Start there, and you'll never have to recover from moments like last night again. Lena stood too. Thank you for talking to me, I mean that. Simone nodded once and left her standing there, but as she walked back through the lounge door, something in her felt lighter, because the message had finally landed where it needed to. By mid-morning, the rhythm of the Harrington had returned, at least on the surface. Guests wheeled their bags across polished tile, coffee cups clinked gently at the bar, a small family asked about nearby zoos. The world moved on like it always does. But inside the management office, it was different. Marcus stood by the window, watching the valet rotate cars in front of the main doors. Adrian typed quietly at his laptop, drafting the official internal memo. Evelyn, the HR lead, reviewed new onboarding modules with a stony focus, and in the center of it all, Simone read through a fresh stack of evaluations, personnel files flagged for review. She wasn't angry. She was exact. I'm not here to punish, she said aloud, scanning one report. I'm here to prevent repetition. Adrienne looked up. We're adjusting our interview process for front desk hires, not just for skill, also for empathy, pattern testing, bias evaluation. Good, Simone replied. She tapped her pen once on the desk. And put me on the rotation starting next quarter. I'll show up at random properties, quietly. Like I did here. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to be what, a secret guest? Not secret, she said. Just anonymous. Until I'm not. Adrian grinned slightly. That's going to make a lot of people nervous. Good, she said. Let them sit in it. The real version of this job doesn't come with warnings. She stood, slipping the papers into a folder. Have the new training go live by next Friday. Include story modules. I want staff reading actual experiences from guests, not fake scripts. I want real words. Human ones. Marcus nodded. Consider it done. Simone left the office, walking back into the lobby. She stopped near the reception desk where a new agent had taken over. He smiled immediately, respectfully, like someone who understood she wasn't just another suit walking by. She returned the nod, then looked around. Everything seemed still on the outside, but she could feel it, small cracks forming in old habits. And that's how real change begins, not with a press release, not with a public apology, with quiet corrections repeated until they stick. She made her way to the elevator, headed back upstairs to grab her things. Her flight wasn't until late afternoon. There was time. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, she stepped out. Heels soft against the carpet, the hallway smelled faintly of fresh linens and lemon. The suite door stood ajar. Housekeeping must have just finished. Inside, her bag was packed neatly, zipped. Her laptop rested on the desk, charger wrapped. Everything was in order, except one thing. Note handle folded, sitting on the nightstand. She opened it. "Miss Harrington, thank you for your grace. I'll be better." Lena. It wasn't fancy, no envelope, just lined notepad paper and careful handwriting. But it meant more than a pre-written company apology ever could. Simone folded it once and slipped it into her purse. Downstairs, a car was waiting. As she exited through the lobby, the same doorman from the night before opened the door with purpose. "Safe travels, Miss Harrington," he said warmly. "We hope to see you again soon." She smiled. "You will." As the car pulled away from the curb, she didn't look back. She didn't need to, because she'd left something behind. Something heavier than luggage. She'd left the weight of being misjudged, the quiet ache of having to explain her worth, and what replaced it was better, understanding, discomfort, growth. For them, and maybe even for herself. But there was still one last thing she wanted to say. Just not to the hotel or the staff. This message was meant for anyone who's ever had to stand in a room and prove they belong. The ride to the airport was quiet. No small talk from the driver. No music playing from the radio. Just the soft whir of tires on pavement and the occasional blink of a turn signal. Simone sat in the back seat with one hand resting on her purse and the other holding the folded note from Lena. She hadn't read it again, but it was there, like a reminder, like a small piece of proof that the previous night hadn't been for nothing. She stared out the window at the rows of brick buildings, the corner gas stations, the faded signs for mechanics and bakeries. This wasn't where she'd planned to be this week. And yet, maybe she'd been meant to be here all along. Not for the board meeting, not for the business, but for the conversation. Because the truth is, this kind of thing didn't shock her anymore. She wasn't angry that it happened, she was tired that it kept happening. Tired of how often worth gets measured by assumptions. Tired of how fast people sort you into categories without asking a single question. Tired of being made to explain things she should never have to say aloud. Yes, this is mine. Yes, I built it. Yes, I deserve to be here. And yet, she wasn't bitter. That's the part people don't understand. Simone didn't carry bitterness. She carried memory. And memory could be powerful if you used it right. As the airport signs came into view, she thought about her younger self again. That girl working night shifts in cheap flats and stiff uniforms. No makeup, no recognition, just drive. Just the belief that someday she'd build something no one could take from her. She had done that. But buildings weren't enough, because even with 17 properties and a team of executives reporting to her, people still looked at her and saw something else, something less. So what do you do when the world refuses to see you? You make sure you see yourself, clearly, without apology, and then you walk in anyway. You hold your ground, you speak plainly, you don't beg for permission. You act like the door was always yours. Simone stepped out of the car, grabbed her bag, and nodded at the driver. No more words needed. Inside the terminal, people hurried around her with their coffee cups and roller bags. TSA announcements echoed through the ceiling speakers. She moved quietly, almost invisible again in the rush of strangers. But in her chest, something settled. She had taken a moment of humiliation and turned it into a mirror for everyone in that hotel to finally see themselves. And mirrors don't lie. They show you who you really are. She hoped Lena would grow from it. She hoped Darren would learn. She hoped Adrian and Marcus would follow through on every promise made in that office. But if they didn't, she'd still be standing. She always had been. Because dignity wasn't something anyone gave her. It was something she never gave up. And for anyone watching, anyone listening who's ever been dismissed, doubted, or spoken to like they didn't matter, Simone had one final thing to say. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know who you are and walk like it every single time. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them learn. Let them wonder how they missed it. And when they finally see you, make sure they never forget. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something deep in your chest, share it. Leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that speak to truth, power, and the people who refuse to be ignored.